The iPhone XS Max and Samsung Galaxy S10 Plus are both capable of taking some excellent photos, but which one is truly the better option of the two? We asked our MacRumors audience on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter to weigh in on our blind camera test, and so in this video, we're going to go over those results. Before we get into the photo comparisons, I want to briefly touch on how we went about this comparison, and then give a bit more insight on the camera systems both phones have to offer. During our tests, these photos were completely untouched, straight out of the camera with factory camera settings, meaning we didn't change the aspect ratio, resolution, etc. The only thing we did was change the rear-facing cameras to 4K recording for each phone. Speaking of the rear-facing cameras, as you can see here, Apple went with a dual camera system with the XS Max, while the S10 Plus received an additional ultra-wide angle lens. The 16 megapixel ultra-wide camera joins the 12 megapixel telephoto and 12 megapixel wide-angle lens to complete the triple camera setup. On the iPhone XS Max, you have a 12 megapixel wide and 12 megapixel telephoto lens for the dual camera system. Alright, so let's get into these photos, starting off with the portrait mode, or what Samsung calls live focus mode. In this photo, the colors are much more natural in A, but B did a better job with depth. The upper part of the cup around A is cut off a bit, although the background looks pretty good. Now the mug's handle inside photo A was untouched, as opposed to B, where it was able to recognize it as part of the background and give it that blur effect. Everything in photo B looks great in terms of depth and blur, but the colors are not accurate. It has a much warmer tone. The objects blurred in the background are also not quite consistent either. The majority of people commenting preferred photo A, but it did such a bad job with that cup in the forefront that I'm gonna have to go with photo B. Inserting a person as the subject this time, photo A seems washed out compared to B, but photo A did a much better job with isolating the subject and not cutting off parts of his coat or hair. In B, the upper right shoulder area has some artifacting. Even though I prefer the colors in B, A turned out to be much better. There's a bit less shadow on the face. Most of the audience preferred A, and I would have to agree. Now this photo was taken in relatively lower light. It was gray and snowy outside, and for some reason, camera A decided to really amplify that and went with a much cooler color temperature. This doesn't look good at all. Even though it was super impressive at not cutting off the sign during its depth effect, compared to photo B, the majority of comments we had on this picture leaned towards B. So even though the photo was washed out, this photo kind of needed it, so I prefer B as well. You can also get a better sense at the same thing happening in this photo too. These next photos were taken on auto settings and again are completely untouched straight out of the camera. Now I'm surprised by this photo because everyone commented about how camera B has been overexposing, blowing out highlights, or washing out pictures, yet a large majority of you chose B. While at first glance, I would probably agree, but if you really look at A, the dynamic range in contrast is just far more accurate. The clouds do a good job at depicting this point. So I'm gonna go with A as well, even though most of you chose B. This picture was only shared on our Instagram, but I think it proves my point on camera A and how well it handles the clouds. Photo B, which has been blowing out highlights during this entire process, really does a number on the sun in this picture, which you can see in the top left corner. Camera A was able to give it a pretty cool look, keep things a bit more natural, and even provide a bit of lens flare, which is always aesthetically pleasing. Since we didn't get a whole lot of comments on this one, I'd be curious to know your thoughts on this photo, so be sure to let us know in the comment section down below. For me, I'm going to go with A. This theme pretty much continues throughout all of the photos taken during my testing. Real quick side note, I do want to touch on the selfie cameras for each phone. I'm not a big selfie person, but both do a really good job with selfies, especially portrait selfies. I think they both look pretty good, and I don't really have a strong opinion either way about which one I like more. I'm curious as to why camera B decided to flip the image, however, but overall both photos looked pretty good. So before we reveal the results, there was a comment on Instagram that really stuck with me. And that's that both of these cameras are amazing and that we are truly spoiled by how far technology has come. These cameras are both capable of taking some pretty incredible photos. And if you're an average consumer who just wants a reliable camera, then you're gonna not be disappointed no matter which phone you pick. With that said, I do think there is a camera that is slightly better here, and that is camera A. Shout out to MKBHD for even playing along with us on Twitter. He absolutely nailed his guess, along with most of you out there, and that is that camera A is indeed iPhone XS Max, and B is Samsung Galaxy S10 Plus, and that was the case across all of the pictures. So my reasons for picking the iPhone have to do with what I said earlier. The colors, dynamic range, and contrast were just better more often than not on the iPhone during our testing. I'm sure I'll get called a fanboy, but it's true. The S10 is definitely capable of taking good photos, but it overexposes nearly everything, and that's still an issue. In terms of portrait photos, I tend to lean more towards Samsung. It does a better job at processing the image and determining what's the subject and what's the background. At least it does when it comes to objects, and with people it's kind of even. The cup photo was a good representation of that. It even blurred through the handle, which was pretty impressive. The one thing I don't like is that it uses its wide-angle camera to take portrait photos. In order to not make it obvious, we had to crop in a little, and so when you take a portrait photo on the S10 Plus, you're gonna get a much wider image. Some people might like that, for some reason, I just don't. Speaking of wide angle, the S10 Plus does have that triple camera setup, and the third camera is an ultra wide angle lens, which is just fantastic for landscapes and really just taking pictures of larger groups. I really do think it's a cool feature to have, so I'm curious to see if Apple will go this route in the future. As far as recording videos, both phones do an excellent job. They're both capable of recording 4K video, but I have to give the stabilization win to the S10 Plus. Even without Super Steady turned on, which reduces the quality to 1080p, there were a lot of micro jitters happening when I was on the move and holding an iPhone in comparison to the S10 Plus. Now it was in the single digits that day, so I was already shaking a bit from the cold. They both do a good job, but I give the edge to the S10 Plus. So let us know which camera you preferred, as well as whether or not these results were surprising to you at all in the comment section down below. This has been Dan with MacRumors. Thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next one.